4 mei, de Dodenherdenking, is vooral een dag voor Nederlanders om te denken aan de gevallenen uit de Tweede Wereldoorlog en ook de gevallenen in andere conflicten waarbij Nederlandse militairen actief waren. Maar het is ook een dag waarop buitenlanders die op de een of andere manier betrokken zijn geraakt bij Nederland soms naar Nederland komen of in ieder geval actief aan Nederland denken. En nu de oorlog zo lang geleden is, gaat het daarbij vooral om de tweede generatie. Zonen en dochters van Amerikanen, Engelsen, Canadezen en soms Duitsers, die op welke manier dan ook tijdens de oorlog in Nederland geweest zijn en daar hun dingen hebben gedaan. Wij spreken vanmiddag met John Keeffe. En hij is de zoon van een piloot van een bommenwerper die terugkwam uit Berlijn en bij Papendrecht moest uitspringen omdat hun vliegtuig op het punt stond om neer te storten. Het vliegtuig kwam overigens neer in Hendrik Ido Ambacht, maar John Keeffe kwam terecht in Papendrecht. En zijn zoon vertelt ons straks welke avonturen hij daar beleefde. Today is Remembrance Day in the Netherlands, the 4th of May, and we have some American guests here in town. Jim, could you tell our viewers who you are and where you're from?
Well, certainly. My name is Jim Keeffe. I'm from Falls City, Washington, USA, and Falls City is about 30 miles east of Seattle.
And Seattle is a big city in the northwest of the United States, isn't it?
Yes.
What is your connection to our hometown here?
The connection is through my father, also Jim Keeffe. As a young 20-year-old pilot, he bailed out of his American bomber. They had just completed a mission over Berlin to bomb Berlin, and on the way back, the airplane was running out of gas because German fighters had shot up 2 of the engines. And so they were not going to make it back to England, and they all bailed out right over the skies of Papendrecht. And my father escaped being captured. The rest of the crew were captured within hours by the Germans. And through the help of brave Dutch men and women, my father spent 5 months in Rotterdam evading from the Germans.
How many members were there in the crew?
There were 11. And one crewman, he was a gunner, was killed when the German fighters attacked. And so he rode the airplane down to the ground, and 10 of them, the remaining 10, bailed out as the airplane was circling Papendrecht. And so 9 of them were captured within a few hours, and my father hid in a rabbit shed behind a Johannes Kortelan's house. And that's how he was picked up by the resistance that evening and went into Rotterdam.
Now, before we go on to your dad's story, what happened to the other 9? They were captured by the Germans. Did they all survive?
They did all survive. The enlisted men, the gunners, were taken to German army camps, prison camps, and the officers were taken to German Luftwaffe prison camps. But they all survived the war and had long lives in the States. And my father lost track of them over the years, but they did survive, yes.
Now, your dad managed to stay out of the hands of the Germans by hiding in it was a rabbit hutch. Yes, a rabbit hutch. And he ended up in Rotterdam. How did he get to Rotterdam? What happened?
2 Papendrechters, Marinus Vet and a Johannes Verdorn, were asked by the local resistance leaders to come to the rabbit hutch and take my father that evening, and they rowed him in a boat up to Dordrecht. And the whole city of Dordrecht was blacked out. And they walked him to the streets down to Aardappelmarkt, to a home there, and that was the first safe house that he was in. And my father stayed there for 1 or 2 nights, and then 2 boys from Rotterdam brought bicycles down to Dordrecht, and they bicycled back to Rotterdam.
And then they were in Rotterdam, and he went into hiding again, presumably waiting to be transported back to England.
Well, he went into hiding, but he didn't want to hide. He didn't want to be cooped up, so a Dutch man gave him false identity papers, and he dressed in Dutch clothes, and so he was out in the streets all the time.
Right. But he probably didn't speak a word of Dutch.
He learned Dutch. He knew German a little bit, and so he was able to communicate more and more as time went on, and he became lifelong friends with some of the Dutch.
Yeah. So I imagine that after the war he's been back to Holland quite a few times.
Yes. First of all, he was very concerned about those who helped him, especially after he was captured, because the Germans said, "We know who helped you, and we're going to not arrest them right now because we want them to send more pilots to us." But in the late 50s, we were stationed in England, and so he came back into Holland, and he found many of the people still alive.
Now, there's a story about him being in a shelter or in a safe house, if you like, together with a young Jewish girl. Could you tell me about that?
Yes, he was in the home of a Dr. and Mrs. Jappe Alberts in Rotterdam, and the doctor was a dentist. And in the attic of the home, the Alberts had been hiding a Jewish family for 2 years by that time. And they would come down 3 times a day for dinner and lunch and breakfast, and that's when he would meet them. And there was a mother and a father and a little girl named Helen. And every once in a while, Mrs. Alberts would take the little girl outside because she was not noticeable being a little girl. But the rest of the time, she was in the attic with the family for almost up to 3 years. And my dad didn't have much communications with her other than when they would come down to dinner and eating times.
But then they were all betrayed by, well, do we know who betrayed them?
After the war, my father wrote letters back and forth to the Alberts family and other families, and Mrs. Alberts had an idea of who betrayed them. It was a betrayal of someone that she knew, and but that's not who captured my father. That's not how he was captured. But that's how the Germans ended up coming to the Alberts home months later, and they broke into the house. They took the Alberts family to the local prisons, and they took Helen and her family up to Westerbork to eventually be transported into Germany. But by that time, the war was ending, and so they survived also.
Everybody survived this history?
So far, but several of the young Dutch men and women who helped my father ended up being murdered at Vught, just south of here a little bit. Some of them, Joberlein in the resistance was killed at Vught. A few of them, Kees van den Engel and a Marijke, were captured and transported to slave labor camps, but they survived. Samuel Eschmeyer, who was one of the fellows who bicycled my dad from Dordrecht to Rotterdam. He was a hot shot in the resistance, and he was killed in a shootout with the Germans. So maybe half the ones survived, half that he met a very bad end.
Now, obviously your dad must have talked to you and told you about his experiences in the war, and that made you interested, I can imagine, because you're here now. Is it the first visit to Holland?
No, this is my third. My first visit was in 2014, actually on the 4th of May also. My second visit was with my wife and daughter in 2019, and this is my third visit.
Okay. And apart from being there tonight at 8 p.m., you've been doing other stuff while you're in Holland, I suppose. Yes,
we're being the tourists, and we've met some fine folks the 3 times that I've been here, and so we're visiting with them. On the 5th of May, which is your Liberation Day, a very special day, we have some things to do, and we're just enjoying ourselves. But I know that today is a very somber and a very special day. We have what we call Memorial Day back in the States to memorialize our war dead also. And so to me, it's a very moving time to be here, especially since my father's experience with the Dutch folks was so close.
All right. Thank you very much, and I hope you will have an enjoyable stay.
Well, my pleasure, and it's an honor to be here. Thank you.